This video lesson is going to cover equations where you can use the distributive property to solve them. I recommend you have a pencil, a calculator, some type of scratch paper, and of course, a growth mindset. In order to do well on today's video lesson, the things you need to know are how to simplify expressions with the distributive property. So we'll be reviewing that. And also, you should be able to solve a two-step equation at this point. So review of the distributive property. If you have 4 times the group x plus 3, you can think of it as x is this unknown amount, like an envelope filled with something, and 3 is just $3. So you have 4 groups of the envelope, and you have 4 groups of $3. So you have each of those 4 times. Therefore, 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 3 is 12. And that's as far as you can go. These are not like terms, so you can't combine them. So I'd like you to pause the video and simplify these two expressions with the distributive property. So the first one, 2 times the quantity y plus 5, you're going to do 2 times 1y, since there's 2 of them. This is just visually showing you what it looks like. So 2 times y is 2y, and 2 times 5 is 10. And then on this one, we have 3 groups of 2n minus 1. So visually, you have 3 of each of these. Therefore, 3 times 2n is 6n, and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. So what's the mistake here? Well, we have negative 8 times 5x. That would result in a negative 40x. So this part is correct. But negative 8 times negative 7, this is an example of where someone forgot to distribute the negative 8. So to fix it, we would do negative 8 times negative 7, which is positive 56. Now, a reminder about the friendship analogy for two-step equations. If you have a two-step equation like this, I tell you to think of the variable like that's u, and then the value that's closest to the variable, or the coefficient of the variable, is your best friend. In our SpongeBob analogy, that would be Patrick. And then the other value that's either being added on or subtracted, that's the just a friend. So in this analogy, that's Squidward. And then on the other side of the equals, that's outside of a party that's going on. That's the other side of the scale. So you think of it as solving to isolate you, and you're at this party.
Attention, everyone! Attention, please! Now that we're all here, I officially declare the party switch to be in the on position.
So therefore, what would we do first to isolate the variable in this equation? Well, we have our x. The 9 is the coefficient, that's the best friend, and the plus 5 would be the just a friend. So we need to do minus 5 to both sides. This becomes 9x equals 3. And then what would we do to isolate x now? Well, we need to get rid of the 9 times x, so we divide by 9 to cancel it out, and we'll get x equals 3 over 9 is the same thing as 1/3. What about this equation? Well, essentially, we have a 1/2 here because it's divided by 2. So in this case, this is SpongeBob and Patrick, and then we have our Squidward, and this is outside. This is the other side of the equals. So we want to undo the negative 7 with a plus 7 because this will become 0. Simplify, and then what do we do to isolate b? We would multiply by 2 because 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we'll get 1b, and then simplify it, and b equals 12. How would we isolate the k? You should subtract 14 on both sides, simplify, and then how do we isolate k in the second step? We want to multiply by a negative 3 because negative divided by a negative will become a positive 1, and simplifying it, you'll get k equals positive 72. How would we isolate the y in this one? So first step is to get rid of the plus 6 by doing minus 6. So that will become 0, and then we'll simplify it. And then what do we do as our second step? We want to divide by a negative 11 because a negative divided by a negative will become a positive 1y. And on the other side, we would just simplify it by canceling out the negatives, and we can leave it as a fraction. Okay, so now this is the new step, solving multi-step equations with the distributive property, and then I'm going to show an example without the distributive property. So if we ignore this side of the equals and we just look at the 5 times y minus 2, 5 times the quantity y minus 2, well, what would that simplify to? That's going to be 5 times y, that's a 1y, 5 times 1 is 5, so 5y, and 5 times negative 2 is and this is just showing that step. So you don't really always have to write this, but 5 times the negative 2 is how we're going to get 5y minus 10. And now here we have a two-step equation. So we need to add 10 to both sides to get rid of the minus 10, simplify the right side, and then divide by 5 to isolate y and get y equals negative 1. Now, the other way you can solve this, I've put a little dot here to emphasize that this means 5 times this quantity, because to undo multiplication, we can divide by 5, because 5 divided by 5 will become a 1. And we have to keep this balanced, so we have to do the same thing to both sides. So 5 divided by 5 will become 1. Therefore, the parentheses are no longer needed. So we just have what's inside here, y minus 2, and negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. So now we just have a one-step equation where we would add 2 to both sides, and y will obviously equal the same thing because it's the same equation just being solved a different way. And I'm recommending you write down an example to refer to. So this is a way you could write down an example. This little green square here is saying you might want to take some notes. You could use your notebook. You could just use, a piece of paper that you can use as you're doing these types of problems. And then emphasizing here that this is division causing it to become 1. So just want to quickly point out the reason you want to learn this first method and not only do the second method is because it can get kind of messy when you're doing more complex equations like this. So if you try the method, that second method where you're going to divide to get rid of the 6, you have a separate term over here. So you would have to divide by 6 there, and you'd also have to divide by 6 on the other side of the equals to keep everything balanced. And so what's going to happen is this one will cancel out. You're going to get 2x minus 3. Could have removed the parentheses. They can also stay. This is going to become 2 divided by 6, which is 1/3, but still fraction. And then you're going to get negative 28 over 6. So you're noticing you're going to be dealing with fractions. You can still solve it. It's just things tend to get a little messier and there's more room for mistakes. So now if we look at this again and we use the distributive property first, 6 times 2x and 6 times negative 3, well, that becomes 12x minus 18. And you'll notice there's no fractions, so there's less likelihood for there to be mistakes. So I recommend learning both methods and not just using this one. Okay, so go ahead and try this. 4 times the quantity 3x plus 7 equals 52. What should we do first? Or what could you do first using either of the two methods? So if you're using the first method, you would distribute the 4 to everything, and you'll get 12x plus 28 equals 52. And now we have a two-step equation. So we're going to subtract the 28 first to get rid of that. Then we're going to divide by 12, and x equals 2. Now, if you use the other method, you would divide by 4 to undo this first and then keep it balanced. Therefore, this amount just has a 1 in front of it, so it's the same thing. So now we would just do minus 7 on both sides, divide by 3. You'll get the same value as obviously the other method. Okay, please try this one. So if you use the first method, you're going to be multiplying both of these by a negative 7, and I added in the Ninja 1 here. It's a plus x, so we're going to have negative 7 times negative 2, positive 14, and negative 7 times positive 1, negative 7x. Need to get rid of this one first, so subtract 14 on both sides. Don't drop the negative here. This is a negative 7x. So here we're going to have to divide by a negative 7, and the answer is x equals negative 1. If you use the other method, you would divide by negative 7 on both sides first. So this amount is all that's left on the left, and then negative 7 here is going to cause this to become a negative 3. Add 2 on both sides, and you'll still get x equals negative 1. Now you're going to do some practice problems on delta math to make sure you're understanding this concept.